Welcome to Twistem TV, where reality bends, secrets surface, and nothing is what it seems. I'm your narrator, your guide through the strange and the unsettling. And today I have a new story to tell. She only wanted to work and raise her daughter. But the factory had other plans, darker, deadlier plans. What if the place you trusted the most was secretly designed to destroy you? The scent of mold and cheap disinfectant was the constant fragrance of Ava's small apartment, a mixture she associated with hopelessness. The eviction notice crumpled in her hand seemed to burn. Her early 20s should have been about dreams and opportunities. But for Ava, every day was a struggle for survival. 6 months ago, the future seemed less bleak. She had a stable job as a seamstress at Willow Garments, a factory that boasted ethical company and safe work environment, labels on its glossy brochures. Ava believed them, or at least she needed to believe them. The exhaustive routine of double shifts, the incessant hum of the machines, and the constant pain in her back were sacrifices she willingly accepted for Sammy, her 6-year-old daughter. Sammy was her universe, a bright-eyed, easily laughing girl who, at the moment, was absorbed in a cheap cartoon on television, oblivious to the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. Her innocence was a balm and a torture for Ava. She needed to protect her. But how? The wrist injury, a repetitive motion that went terribly wrong, had been the beginning of the end. A sharp pain, a snap, and the feeling that something had broken inside her. In the factory infirmary, the paramedic, a woman with a hardened expression named Brenda, barely looked at her. "Just a swelling, Ava. Get back to work." But the pain persisted, growing, making it impossible to hold a needle. Impossible even to comb Sammy's hair without a groan. She tried for weeks, but the pain was relentless. Finally, she went to a private doctor she managed to pay for with her last savings. Diagnosis: a severe tendon injury, requiring surgery and months of recovery. When she submitted the medical certificate to Willow Garments, she was met with calculated coldness. "We regret, Mrs. Silva," said the HR manager, a man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But your contract has a continuity of service clause. Your inability to work for more than 2 consecutive weeks nullifies your right to benefits and, unfortunately, your employment." The factory's ethics dissolved before her eyes like cheap fabric. It was a flimsy excuse, a blatant injustice. The bitter taste of betrayal was almost as strong as the pain in her wrist. Now, with overdue rent and eviction knocking at the door, Ava knew she had to fight. Not just for herself, but for Sammy. With every door slammed in her face, Ava's determination hardened. The local union, which she thought would be her salvation, proved to be a powerless facade. "Willow Garments is powerful, Ava. They have the best lawyers," the representative said with an apologetic shrug, typing on his computer, barely looking at her. The few lawyers she managed to contact through free newspaper ads or neighbor referrals all said the same thing. "Difficult case. Without concrete proof of bad faith, it's your word against theirs." Consultation fees, even symbolic ones, were a luxury she could no longer afford. The town of Willow Creek, which once seemed like a refuge of simple living, now revealed itself to be a maze of dusty streets and scarce opportunities. The few remaining shops and small businesses barely hired, and when they did, it was for manual labor that her injured wrist wouldn't allow. Ava felt cornered, her life shrinking day by day. Sammy, sensing the tension, would ask with her small voice, "Mommy, when are we going to have hamburgers again?" Ava's heart would break. Desperate, she began to revisit every detail of her time at Willow Garments, searching for any irregularity, any flaw. She remembered the rigid safety protocols that, in practice, were often ignored by supervisors to speed up production. She recalled whispered complaints among colleagues about the relentless pace and few breaks. But these were just anecdotes, nothing she could use against a corporation. Then a small memory sparked a thought. Brenda, the factory paramedic, the one who had dismissed her injury, always seemed nervous, her eyes restless. And there were the mysterious training sessions for newly hired employees, conducted behind closed doors, that no one knew exactly what they taught. Older colleagues with years of service seemed to avoid them and even look away when the subject was mentioned. It was a loose thread, tiny, almost invisible, but the only one Ava had. She knew she had to pull it, even if she didn't know where it would lead her. With the little internet she could access on a neighbor's laptop, Ava began to research workplace accidents at Willow Garments. There wasn't much, just scattered records of minor incidents. and slight injuries readily resolved. But then she found something strange. A newspaper article from years ago about an employee who had suffered a serious hand injury, very similar to hers, and who, like her, had been dismissed without compensation under a similar contract clause. The employee's name, Miguel Sanchez. The article mentioned he had tried to sue the company, but the case was quickly dismissed. Ava felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't an isolated case. There was a pattern. She tried to locate Miguel Sanchez, but the name was too common and there were no recent traces. Frustration was a bottomless pit, but she persisted. She started frequenting the city library, where she spent hours reading microfilms of old newspapers, cross-referencing dates and names of Willow Garments employees who had been dismissed under questionable circumstances. The pattern repeated itself. Serious injuries, abrupt dismissals, and the same contract clause as justification. One evening while Sammy slept, Ava heard faint knocking at the door. It was late and fear coursed through her. She grabbed a kitchen knife before peering through the peephole. Outside stood Brenda, the factory paramedic. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked visibly distressed. Ava, hesitant, opened the door just a crack. I need to talk to you, Ava," Brenda whispered, her voice choked. "About the factory. About what's really happening there." Brenda entered, visibly trembling. Her story was terrifying. She confirmed Ava's suspicions. Willow Garments was not just negligent. They were, in fact, orchestrating injuries for their most vulnerable employees. Brenda confessed that she was forced to record false diagnoses, minimizing the severity of injuries, and then, under threat of losing her own job and facing charges, was instructed to fill out internal reports in a way that activated contract termination clauses, ensuring that workers received no compensation. "They're not accidents, Ava," Brenda said, her voice almost inaudible. "They're traps, and there's something much bigger behind it." With Brenda's documents in hand, Ava knew she needed more than just papers and accusations. She needed a way to expose Alistair, Finch, and his criminal network without putting Brenda at risk and without having her evidence discredited. They devised a risky plan. Brenda, still employed at the factory despite constant fear, would be the internal link. She would provide information about Finch's routine and the company's security, as well as monitor any suspicious movements that might indicate they were aware of the investigation. Ava, in turn, would seek out an investigative journalist. She knew the story needed to be told by someone with credibility and reach. After many frustrated attempts, she finally caught the attention of Ethan Cross, a reporter known for his boldness and his dedication to exposing injustices, even those that large corporations tried to suppress. Ethan, initially skeptical, was intrigued by Ava's passion and the consistency of her story. When Ava showed him the evidence provided by Brenda, copies of falsified medical records, internal correspondence, and even bank statements that showed transfers to shell clinics, Ethan's eyes gleamed with the prospect of a scandal. Together they set a trap. The idea was to create a situation where Finch felt safe, discussing the details of the scheme, while secretly being recorded. Brenda warned that Finch would have a confidential meeting in his private office at the factory late at night with his main accomplices, the excuse to discuss financial adjustments for the next quarter. Ethan provided high-tech recording equipment, and with Ava's help and Brenda's inside knowledge of the factory floor plan, they found a strategic location to install hidden cameras and microphones. On the appointed night, the tension was palpable. Ava and Ethan hid in a maintenance annex, monitoring the cameras. Finch arrived, accompanied by his lawyers and the HR manager, the same man with the false smile. As the conversation progressed, Finch's voice, initially calm, grew louder and more arrogant as he detailed the scheme's profits and plans to expand the operation. He scoffed at the naive workers who had fallen into his traps. The evidence was being recorded. But then, an unforeseen event. A night security guard on his rounds noticed a strange light coming from the annex. He approached, and Ava's heart pounded. The security guard opened the annex door. Ava and Ethan froze, panic in their eyes. However, before he could react, Brenda, who had anticipated a possible mishap and was waiting outside Finch's office, quietly emerged and distracted the guard with an impromptu story about a water leak. The distraction was enough for Ava and Ethan to disable the equipment and escape through the back door. By a thread, the recording operation was successful, and the evidence was secure. The next day, Ethan Cross published his article in the newspaper. The report, detailed and supported by Brenda's recordings and documents, exposed Willow Garment's insurance fraud scheme in all its brutality. The scandal spread like wildfire. The news of the ethical company that deliberately exploited its workers shocked the nation. Authorities acted quickly. Alistair Finch and his accomplices were arrested in their offices, their empires of lies crumbling under the weight of the truth. Willow Garments was closed, and a full investigation into the company's operations was launched. For Ava, the victory had a bittersweet taste. The factory that had hurt her and almost destroyed her life was finally paying for its crimes. But the scars, physical and emotional, would remain. Brenda, for her bravery, received protection and help to restart her life. Testifying against Finch, justice for the other injured workers began to be sought, and a compensation fund was established. Months later, Ava got the surgery she needed and, with the compensation she received, was able to pay overdue rent and start anew. She didn't return to being a seamstress, but she used her skills in another area, opening a small sewing and repair workshop in her own apartment. Sammy, growing strong and happy, was her greatest reward. Ava's story in Willow Creek became a testament to human resilience and the importance of fighting against injustice, even when the odds seem impossible. The sun finally shone over Willow Creek, no longer filtered by the shadow of a corrupt factory, but with the promise of a new dawn. Ava's courage exposed a monster, hiding behind corporate walls. But how many others remain in silence? If you believe stories like hers deserve to be heard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your voice can be part of the change.